He masked his identity and wore gloves for the lens, having scouted the location for weeks or even months. Every lens and every security light had been carefully mapped out in his mind. He calculated his entry, killing the power and neutralizing every obstacle in his path. By every standard profiling metric used in modern criminal investigation, the level of foresight and tactical precision displayed here proves the Tucson home invasion of Nancy Guthrie was anything but random. This wasn't some messy, adrenaline-fueled outburst or a desperate crime of passion. This was a cold, calculated operation engineered with surgical intent. Someone sat down long before that night and scripted every single movement before pulling the trigger on the plan. And that is precisely why a specific crumb of information from Ashley Banfield's investigators. On the March 31st broadcast of Drop Dead, Sirius feels so much more ominous, because meticulous planning reveals everything about the person behind the curtain. These predators plan for the variables they can see, the hurdles they've visualized, and the paths they've walked 1,000 times in their heads. Yet every blueprint has a breaking point, where the rehearsal ends and chaos takes over. If Banfield's insiders are on the money, that breaking point happened on the rear deck, in the shadows, before the mask went on. There is a glaring question about this evidence that nobody has raised in the media. It's a mystery hiding in the silence between the doorbell footage and the events unfolding in the backyard before he ever walked into view. A question with an answer that, if found, is likely sitting in a forensic lab waiting for modern DNA profiling to flag it. Don't go anywhere, because this specific detail flips the entire script. Once you see it, the whole case looks different. For those of you who have stayed with us, following our deep dives into the Nancy Guthrie disappearance, you already know the stakes. You know who Nancy is. The mother of today's show's Savannah Guthrie, taken from her Tucson home in early 2026. This isn't some dusty file. It's a massive, ongoing federal manhunt. The Pima County Sheriff and the FBI are working this around the clock. The flow of information is simultaneously locked down tight and riddled with leaks, in a way we haven't seen in a high-profile abduction for many years. We've already dissected the blood evidence and what it truly tells the feds about the struggle inside. We've explored the possibility of this being an inside job, a theory backed by insider reports suggesting the killer knew the house better than any random stalker. We even investigated the discarded clothing found in the laundry area behind the Guthrie residence, recovered by independent searchers, details the local sheriff has refused to address. We've looked at the claims of a second ransom note, the ongoing credibility crisis with Sheriff Nanos, and that Pima deputy linked to a different kidnapping case that raised major red flags. You don't need a summary of the facts. You've been part of this investigation since day one. But here's the one thing you haven't heard yet. Investigative journalists have completely overlooked the tactical fallout from a specific detail revealed on Ashley Banfield's Drop Dead Sirius show on March 31st. First, we need some context. To grasp why this specific point carries so much weight, you must first realize the exact blueprint of this hit and where the massive holes are hiding. Just one more thing. Before moving on, let's clarify our purpose. We aren't here to profit from a family's nightmare. We do this because when a woman vanishes from her own home, and when the official story keeps changing while nobody asks the tough questions, someone has to step up. That is our mission. Today's question has been completely ignored by every other media outlet covering the story. Look closely at how this hit was organized. See what the facts reveal. Let's look at the hard data. This was a mission carried out in total darkness. Whoever did this stayed low and out of sight during the approach. The out either cut beforehand or handled on the way in, killing the visibility at crucial angles. Any camera capable of getting a clear shot of the face had been taken out. That isn't just a lucky break. That is professional scouting turned into cold, hard execution. The intruder approached the front and tripped the doorbell camera. The FBI verified this footage and put it out for the world to see. If you're following the news, you've seen it. You see a figure. You clearly see the gloves, but the face is obscured, calculated to be impossible to ID. The actual entry point was around the back. 2 rear doors and a gate, multiple exit paths that had to be secured for the plan to work. Banfield's inside sources report, and we will break down those sources shortly, that those doors were held open using items found right there in the yard. Specifically, Nancy's own planters taken from the back deck. Just process that for a second, because the location of those pots changes everything. Not the front yard, not the side, the back. That's the blind spot for the doorbell camera. That is exactly where the suspect spent his time, before walking around front into the camera's view, already wearing his gloves. The back deck is where the clock started ticking on this hit. That's where physical objects were touched, grabbed, moved, and shoved into place by someone who isn't Nancy Guthrie or anyone else involved. This sets the stage for our deep dive into the glove evidence, both official and rumored. We need to be clinical here because the line between hard evidence and logical theory is the key to understanding this entire puzzle. Here is what's solid, FBI vetted and public. The intruder had gloves on when he triggered that front doorbell camera. No one is debating this. It isn't a rumor, it's right there on the tape. Take a look, it's a fact. Official word from the Puma County Sheriff's Office, March 4th. They found some gloves about 2 miles away from Nancy Guthrie's place. Police linked them to a local cook, but he's been cleared of everything. Those gloves weren't part of the kidnapping at all, totally unrelated. So we know the guy wore gloves at the entrance. The FBI video proves that. That other pair found 2 miles out? Not his. But here is what remains a mystery. This is the part that never gets mentioned in the briefings. You won't find this in any police report or news clip out there. Exactly when did he put those gloves on? That's the real puzzle. We know he had them. We know he didn't want the camera seeing his skin. That much is obvious. But where in the timeline of that night did he decide to gear up? It changes the whole profile if he was covered up before he even hit the yard. If he never touched a single thing with his bare hands. If there was always a barrier between him and the scene. Or maybe he just made a calculated move for the camera. Maybe he only masked up because he knew a lens was pointed at him. He was definitely covered for the front door. We've seen it. But what about before the camera caught him? In the backyard? Fumbling with the gate, the door handle, or those flower pots in the dark. Was he barehanded then? That's the huge question nobody is asking. And look at the doorbell footage. What kind of gloves were they? Heavy-duty work gear, or those thin, medical-style ones? That specific detail changes everything for the crime lab. Thick gloves are great for blocking fingerprints, but they're terrible at stopping sweat and skin cells from leaking through. Nitrile or latex gloves trap DNA way better. But they're flimsy. They rip easily when you're grabbing rough surfaces. These two pieces of the puzzle, the material and the timing, are still total secrets. We just know he had them at the door, and some other pair was a dead end. Everything in the middle is a giant blank space. In a case built on DNA and genealogy, these aren't just minor details. They are the key to knowing if the evidence in the lab came from a protected hand or a naked one. Let's look at what the sheriff's office actually said about that DNA. Here is what Pima County has confirmed for the record. This has been stated publicly and backed up by major news outlets. First, they found foreign DNA on the Guthrie property. It wasn't hers. It wasn't from her family or her inner circle. An outsider left that trace. Second, that profile has been uploaded into the National CODIS database. The FBI runs a massive federal archive packed with genetic blueprints from known criminals, those under arrest, and biological evidence gathered at crime scenes nationwide. Roughly 21 million entries sit in that vault. Yet, they found nothing. Third, investigators are pivoting to genetic genealogy as their next lead. We need to clarify what a CODIS failure really implies. It is far from a total standstill. The system is a heavy hitter, but it certainly isn't all-knowing. Names hit that database only if a person has already been processed for a specific felony, found guilty in court, or had their samples taken during an earlier probe. If your record is completely clean, without any prior run-ins with the law that required a swab, if a person remained invisible until the tragedy at Nancy Guthrie's place, CODIS has no way to track them down. Its reach is limited strictly to the data already on file. Striking out in CODIS doesn't mean the suspect is a ghost. It simply signals that standard police procedures have hit a brick wall. The case now demands a far more sophisticated strategy. That is where genetic genealogy steps in. This is the ultimate game changer. This investigative method exploded into the spotlight after unmasking the infamous Golden State Killer, Joseph James DeAngelo, caught in 2018 after decades of dead ends. Since that breakthrough, the technique has evolved at a lightning pace. Dozens of investigations have since utilized this approach. Crimes gathering dust for 20, 30, or 40 years are being solved. Here is the process. Detectives take the mystery sample, the evidence lifted from the scene that CODIS couldn't identify. The primary site relied upon is typically GED Match, a hub where users willingly share their genetic data to locate distant kin. The software hunts for fragmented links, the kind of DNA shared between blood relatives. It's not a perfect bullseye, but a connection, proving they share a common ancestor. Using those leads, specialized genealogists, expert researchers in this field, like the pioneers at C.C. Moore and Parabon, nanolabs, begin constructing intricate family trees. They trace those far-off cousins, moving both up and down the lineage. They pinpoint specific lineages, narrowing down locations and age groups. They dig through public archives, birth certificates and marriage licenses, death notices, old census logs, and digital news morgues until it may take time, but the results are becoming undeniable. They find a small group who likely provided that mystery DNA. From there, they collaborate with police to rule out suspects until one name remains. The Pima County Sheriff's Department has now confirmed they are taking this exact path. This explains why determining the exact origin of the DNA found on site is so vital. To be more precise, tracing any biological traces left on the patio before gloves were used is a critical breakthrough. This could change everything because the pedigree and state of the evidence are paramount. A firm squeeze on a gritty exterior, the kind of whole hand grip needed to move a massive planter, leaves a biological trail far different from a random brush. If the traces, extracted from that scene, came from that specific, unmasked grip on a surface the killer deemed safe, then the task force has way more than a simple database hit. They might have data strong enough to find distant kin online and map a tree that reveals a suspect. That is the massive weight of this planter detail, not as a proven truth, nor as locked-in proof, but as the pivotal inquiry sitting at the very heart of what genetic tracking can achieve in this manhunt. The planter lead, the origin, the story, the impact. On March 31st, 2026, Ashley Banfield shared on her crime show that insiders claimed the killer used Nancy Guthrie's own clay pots from the deck to wedge open 2 entrances and the back gate during the hit. He took her personal belongings that I can only assume she spent years caring for, and twisted them for his dark plan. He grabbed her favorite plants and used them to jam that door wide. Before we run with this, let's be real about the source. This is one report from one show via one reporter citing police insiders. The local sheriff has not signed off on this yet. The feds have not mentioned it in their official briefings. No other news desk has backed this up as of today's show. We are treating this as a reliable but singular report from a professional with a solid history of getting things right in this probe, even if it is unconfirmed. Handle it with care. Your interpretation depends on that distinction. Do not take it as the absolute gospel truth. View it as a trustworthy lead that still needs a second pair of eyes. There is a line there, and we always draw it clearly right here. Let's look at Banfield's history here, because the strength of a lead isn't just about numbers. It is about how solid the pipeline is. Ashley Banfield has arguably been the most reliable voice following this trail. Her sources inside the force have leaked details that eventually became official public knowledge. She is meticulous about separating what is being whispered from what is being verified. That history does not turn a single report into a proven fact, but it means we should not just ignore it. This is not just a guess wrapped up in a fancy bow. This is a veteran with a real pulse on the investigation, sharing what she is hearing. If that information is spot on, and we are not saying it is, the entire landscape of this case shifts. Moving 3 heavy planters from the deck to wedge doors open, entering through 2 rear doors and a gate handled by a suspect missing from the federal database. Someone likely being hunted through complex family tree analysis right now. Those three specific items serve as vital forensic hubs. He actually grabbed them. Moving and placing these items demanded heavy, intentional, hand-to-surface interaction. These actions happened in the shadows, away from the doorbell lens that filmed his covered hands. This mystery remains ignored. The glove timeline. We are raising a technical point that has been completely overlooked by mainstream media outlets. The footage proves he was gloved at the main entrance. The lens confirmed it. However, the rear deck sits in a total visual void. If the insiders are correct, he definitely handled objects on that dark back patio. But when did he actually suit up? Scenario 1. He was fully masked before even stepping onto the property, prior to touching that gate, those doors, or any of the planters. Under this theory, his forensic precautions began the very second he crossed the perimeter of the yard. Total containment, perfect discipline, zero chance of bare-handed transfer. He had those gloves on while hoisting those heavy pots, while wedging doors open and creeping through the pitch-black backyard. If so, those ceramic containers are likely a forensic dead end, not due to a mistake, but because he was flawless from start to finish. Scenario 2. He only pulled those gloves on, specifically for the front porch, knowing the doorbell was likely recording his every move. He masked up for the camera's sake, but perhaps ignored the rear deck, where this whole intrusion actually began. He knew the back was a blind spot, so he may have moved freely there, before the threat of filming forced him into a state of total discipline. If that holds, his actions at the back of that house create an entirely different forensic landscape. The latch, the handles, and the flower pots could all be hot. High probability zones for bare-handed transfers. Consider the physical mechanics of moving a large planter. The science is revealing. This isn't a quick tap. A door handle requires only a fleeting touch, a brief flick. Minimal surface contact leaves nothing but a tiny, fragmented smudge at the very best. A heavy planter, specifically those massive Arizona-style clay pots, requires a much more significant effort. You need two hands, with fingers digging deep into the textured surfaces. Your palms must brace against the sides to take the full weight. You are shifting a heavy load, bending down to carefully set its position. That kind of friction doesn't leave a partial print. It leaves a massive signature. Prolonged pressure creates a significant transfer of genetic data. Clay and terracotta are porous substances. Such textures trap biological data much more effectively than slick metal or glass. These surfaces aren't the best for lifting traditional fingerprints, but they are perfect for capturing traces of DNA, especially in the heat, where sweat and skin cells rub off easily during a struggle. Tucson, Arizona, early 2026. Even after dark, it is sweltering. Rough clay surfaces, a desperate grab made in the shadows, during a high-stakes mission where adrenaline is pumping and the body is soaked in sweat, shedding cells at a massive rate while hitting multiple surfaces under extreme pressure. If those hands were bare, or if they grabbed something before the gloves were pulled on, biological evidence was definitely left behind at the scene. The real mystery is if that sample is usable, and if it has been flagged as the starting point for the genetic profile the federal agents are currently digging through. Look at the actual physical effort this operation required. You are not just moving a single planter. Banfield's reporting cites 3 specific moves: 2 rear doors and the back gate. 3 separate objects. 3 distinct moments of direct contact. If bare skin touched even one of those 3 spots, we are not looking at a fluke. It is a clear, repeated pattern across the board. Every single grab adds another layer of forensic proof. For a detective, finding matching DNA on different items at one location would be a massive breakthrough for the entire investigation. It proves more than just a person being present. It shows they were the ones doing the heavy lifting. Hauling and shifting objects is behavioral evidence, not just a random biological trace. What the record says and what it hides. Let us be surgical about the facts. Because to see where this case is headed, you have to spot the holes in the story they are telling us. Pima County authorities admit they recovered DNA from the grounds. No system matches yet. They are looking into family tree tracing now. That is the official line they are feeding the public. But here is what they are dodging. The questions no official will touch. Where exactly on that property was the DNA found? Was it the front door, the backyard, or that specific gate? Did it come from one person or several? Is the sample even viable? Can it actually work for genealogy? Or is it too degraded to find a match? Has the search for relatives actually started yet? And have they found any leads? Not a single word of clarity. In that vacuum of information, the detail about the flower pots suggests why they might be staying silent. Where on that land did that mystery DNA actually originate? We are not claiming to have the smoking gun. We are framing the problem and showing our work, so that those of you tracking every detail of this investigation see the divide between the truth and the talking points, and why it matters. Here is what Sheriff Chris Nanos has gone on record saying. They have repeatedly taken to the podium to claim this hunt remains wide open. The Bureau is fully committed while forensic teams grind through the evidence. Every lead is being scorched. They still hold out hope that Nancy survives. Yet he has stayed completely silent regarding where that DNA was pulled from, its overall purity, or the current lab status of the specimen in question. That is the official script. But into that calculated silence, a leak from the Banfield camp triggers a massive red flag. It hits a nerve the feds haven't touched. The reality of mid-hunt tracking. True crime junkies often get one thing dead wrong about this technology. There is a total myth about the clock on these probes we must shatter, because it dictates how you gauge where the boots are hitting the ground. This isn't Hollywood magic. When a sample hits the genealogy lab, whether it is sitting on a bench at Parabon, with a private hired gun, or tucked inside a federal unit, the wait time for a hit is a complete roll of the dice. If a suspect has close kin on the grid, it is a breeze. When relatives flood public databases, the net can close in mere days. But in harder cases where a target's bloodline has stayed off the radar, or hails from underrepresented groups, the clock stretches for weeks or months. Do not blame the tech. That is not the bottleneck here. The gear is solid, battle-tested, and razor-sharp. The real deal-breaker is the data pool. Did the target's family upload their profiles to public ancestry sites? A few first or second cousins means the family tree explodes instantly. If the bloodline stayed in the shadows by luck or design, the lab is working with scraps and the search grinds to a crawl. We are guessing which wall they have hit in this specific hunt. That secret is being kept strictly behind a curtain. Fact: official reports and outside sources prove they are using the tech. The PCSD signed off on that, and multiple media outlets confirmed it. The search is live. The million-dollar question is the progress and the state of the sample itself. C. Moore, the titan of genealogy at Parabon who turned this into a weapon and did more for the craft than anyone in the game, is blunt. The quality of the specimen dictates the win. A pristine, single-source hit from the scene unlocks the whole arsenal. But a messy, thinned-out, or ruined sample chokes the search algorithm. Grabbing a clay pot versus a quick brush against a handle is not just detail. It is about the raw volume and survival of the genetic code left behind. That is why the exact spot on the Guthrie Ranch is a tactical pivot point, not just a lab question, but the heart of the entire strategy. Clean DNA builds trees faster and locks the target down tighter. That single tree is the breakthrough that cracks this whole mystery. We're looking at the insider threat and the role those planters played. Longtime viewers of our channel understand our focus on what we call the internal breach theory. This premise is backed by leaked evidence suggesting that the person behind this act had a layout of the grounds that goes way beyond basic street-level scouting. The detail about those planters, if it holds up, gives this theory a level of precision we can't ignore. Think about what choosing those specific flower pots says about the killer's mindset. Imagine the task. You have to jam open 2 rear exits and the perimeter gate. You need a heavy object to use as a wedge, something to keep those doors from locking while you work. You have options. You could bring your own gear to the crime scene, a professional doorstop, a heavy rock, or something you prepped at home. You could just wing it and scavenge whatever you find when you get there. Or you could rely on specific items you already know are sitting in the yard, because you've spent enough time close to the house to know exactly where they are. Choosing NY's own garden pots wasn't just some lucky improvisation. Winging it means you show up at the patio and grab the first thing you see. The call to use those specific pots to secure the doors suggests you either found them by pure chance or they were part of your plan from day one. That's a massive distinction when we're talking about an inside job. If a suspect was lurking on or near that estate, they were close enough to see everything happening on that back deck, close enough to take a mental inventory of every single object. They identified 3 specific planters as the perfect tools for the job, and knew they were in the right spot to keep the exits clear. That is intimate reconnaissance. This isn't just a quick look over the fence. It's a tactical survey, and nobody takes a tactical survey of a private patio by accident. Then we have the empty house next door, the staging ground. We've talked before about that abandoned property right next to the scene, the residence adjacent to Nancy Guthrie's place, which had been sitting empty, and which investigators were checking as a possible hideout or lookout. When you're doing high-level pre-operational scouting, a vacant lot next door is a total game changer. It gives you proximity without any eyes on you, looking like a dead zone from the street. You can track every single person coming and going. You can map out security gaps and camera blind spots from a few feet away. You see everything. You can see exactly what kind of furniture and pots are on the porch. It might have provided a straight line of sight into the backyard. A scout with enough patience could have mapped the entire thing out. We still don't know what kind of physical evidence was pulled from that empty house. We don't know if the police gave it the same forensic deep dive they gave NY's home. People in this circle keep asking, but the official files are staying tight-lipped. Yet, the trail of clues links a potential staging zone to a lookout point to a methodical sweep of the rear deck, proving that items from that patio were used during the snatch. That's a rock-solid timeline. And in a hunt where genetic profiles and DNA origins are everything, every single link matters to figure out who touched what and where they were standing. There's a much tougher mystery hidden in the insider access theory that the flower pot detail brings to light. If the attacker used the victim's own belongings as gear, if the plan relied on knowing those pots sat right there as usable props, then the prep work for this hit reached a level of detail that is honestly terrifying. Either a predator was on that land long enough to map the rear deck, or he was fed that intel by someone who knew the layout. One path leads to a stalker in the shadows. The other is far more intimate. Neither is a good thought. Detectives are likely chasing both right now. And that DNA evidence, specifically if it was pulled from those patio surfaces, tells us which of those theories is winning, because it proves how well the suspect knew the blind spots at the back of that house. The circle closes. This is what it all means. This is where we stand tonight. Sources tell Ashley Banfield that the attacker used Nancy Guthrie's own flower pots to prop open 2 back doors and a gate during the snatch. That's a single-source claim from one reputable reporter, not confirmed by Pima County or the Bureau. It's unverified for now, but if those pots were actually handled, gripped and moved by someone other than Nancy or her family, whose profile isn't in any criminal database, then his identity might be under a genetic microscope right now. The feds have those pots. They have every scrap of evidence recovered from that yard. Pima County sheriffs confirmed they've got DNA and they're running it. They are leaning hard into genetic genealogy. We know the suspect wore gloves at the front entrance. The FBI confirmed it, but the front door wasn't the starting line. The back patio was. Whether those gloves were on early or just for the cameras, that's a question that hasn't been answered publicly. If he grabbed those pots bare-handed, he left a signature on items sitting in a federal lab. If that sample is strong enough, even a distant relative in a public database could break this case wide open. They don't need a mugshot. They don't need a name in some file. They trace the family tree, they narrow it down, they close in, and eventually, just like they did with the Golden State Killer, following a blueprint seen in scores of national cases, they eventually zero in on a suspect. We aren't debating if genetic genealogy is effective for this specific investigation. Pima County officials have verified that this particular lead is under active review. The real uncertainty lies in whether the evidence they collected is viable. Did that biological profile originate from one careless touch on a dark Tucson patio, just seconds before the perpetrator pulled on those gloves? That remains the missing piece of this puzzle. Authorities haven't touched that topic, yet it likely holds the key to cracking the entire mystery wide open. Our team is monitoring the situation, and we will update you the moment the silence breaks. Anyone possessing details regarding the vanishing of Nancy Guthrie is urged to step forward. Reach out to the Pima County Sheriff's tip line or contact federal investigators at the FBI directly. You can find all necessary reporting links located in the video summary below. Keep in mind, Nancy Guthrie is a mother and a grandmother. She is a human being who matters to family members still searching for answers. We refuse to drop this investigation until the truth surfaces. Catch you in our next update. Before signing off, we need to reiterate this critical point one final time. Our primary focus today isn't confirming if a criminal act actually took place. It is not about the search's existence, but rather a far more precise and forensically vital mystery. Did the individual who orchestrated every single facet of this crime overlook that brief window before any lens was active? If they truly made that mistake, if a blind spot existed on that patio where they worked bare-handed, physical evidence was inevitably left behind. That proof was abandoned at the scene, and federal agents likely hold it right now. This isn't just theory. Evidence of DNA at the site is a confirmed fact. We know for certain that the national database search turned up 0 results. Investigators are officially pursuing the lineage-based tracking method as we speak. The specific information regarding the flower pot comes directly from high-level police insiders. Analyzing all these variables leads us directly to that pivotal question regarding the gloves. This is the central mystery, and the probe is either sitting on the answer or closing in fast. Regardless, our team will break the news as soon as it goes public. Every detail shared in this broadcast is derived from open-source journalistic records, verified police briefings, and identified news outlets. Any data originating from a solitary witness is clearly marked for transparency throughout the video. We haven't singled out or hinted at any specific person as a suspect in Nancy Guthrie's case. This presentation does not serve as a formal allegation or a judicial ruling, nor does it pinpoint any particular individual as the perpetrator of a crime. The search for Nancy Guthrie remains a live and fluid police operation. We provide this material strictly for educational and investigative dialogue. The disappearance of Nancy Guthrie in Tucson is considered one of the most complex and mysterious investigations currently underway. Evidence suggests this was not a random act, but a carefully planned operation, with the suspect disabling security systems and concealing their identity. Doorbell footage shows the intruder wearing gloves, yet the actual entry occurred at the rear, an unmonitored area. A key detail from journalist Ashley Banfield suggests the suspect used the victim's own planters to wedge doors open, raising the possibility that DNA was left behind before gloves were worn. Authorities confirmed foreign DNA was recovered, but found no match in the CODIS system, prompting a shift to genetic genealogy. The case remains active, with the critical question of when the suspect put on gloves potentially holding the key to solving it.